Welcome back to the Science of Turning Back Time. This is episode 3, and I'm very excited to have with me today Joanna Bednarik, who is an IFN certified health coach, as well as a number of other things. But today I'd like to really pick your brains, Joanna, around the psychology of change. And thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Charmaine, for inviting me, and congratulations on your new podcast.
Thank you. Jo, I'm going to jump right in. Why is it so difficult for us to make change? Often we know what we need to do. Most of the time it's not so much the knowing what to do, it's the actually doing it.
And unfortunately, from a brain perspective, our brain does not going to support change, right? Because our brain is wired for survival and not for transformation. So there are a number of obstacles from the brain perspective. They're not going to support our natural implementation of change. So our brain prefers predictability and routine because familiar patterns, they are associated with safety. And also our brain needs to use less power if we're repeating the same patterns. So from this perspective, for instance, it's hard to implement change. And this is driven by the limbic system, which perceives our emotions and threats. So when we face change, when we're trying to change something, our brain may perceive the change as a risk. So it will then create or trigger some kind of stress response and fear response. And also it can trigger our kind of survival resistance, if you like. This is also called limbic friction. So whenever you start to implement something new, you will face limbic friction. So your brain will create this resistance because of the survival. So if you think about the most important part of our brain that plays a role in habit formation is the basal ganglia. And that prefers automatic actions as well. So habits, right? Something that we have done many times in the past. And this is going to make much harder for prefrontal cortex, for the part of our brain which is responsible for decision making, for rational thinking. That's going to be, the process of change is going to be very difficult for this part of our brain because of those patterns. So if you think about change, so for change we need effort, we need consistency, we need repetition. We also need to overcome discomfort in order to change. And initially, our brain is going to approach that as a risk. So it's not going to be supportive in implementing something which is unfamiliar unless we actively work on rewiring our brain over and over again by repeating the same action and having the positive reinforcement. That's where, you're giving your brain chance to adapt. And through very small, efforts and small changes, your brain won't trigger this kind of resilience-based survival. It will just slowly adapt to change. That's why small changes are more effective. And from the brain perspective, we definitely want to go small steps, one step at a time.
It's a really interesting one. I'm very interested in what you said about routine. It's easier for the brain to kind of stick to habits and routines that we're quite used to. And it is interesting. I am going to make a little confession here to my listeners in that a few years ago I was talking to Joe. So Joe and I have been working together for quite some time now. And I had a little vice. And, often people think that when you are working in a health industry or, you're a functional medicine practitioner, that your diet is 100% perfect. But I used to have this little vice. So at lunchtime, I used to go out for a cup of tea, and then I would have a bag of crisps. And I knew it was bad for me. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. And yet, most days I actually ended up doing this. So I had this chat with Joe and saying, well, I don't know why I do this because it's just one of those habits I'm finding difficult to break. And your advice to me was to break the routine or the habit. So go out, go to a different coffee shop than you normally do, and just break the routine of what you're doing. which is exactly what I did. Started just going another block away to a different coffee shop, and it just completely broke the habit or the routine. So that was really interesting for me around how we form routines and habits. And so I no longer made that association in my brain between walking into that place, getting the cup of tea and the crisps.
It's very interesting. And again, our brain does not distinguish between good and bad habits, right? Habits are just habits. So when you're working on developing and, kind of creating and implementing good habits, and pretty much the same science applies to stopping the bad habits as well. So you need to look into your environment and make it very difficult for you to continue with your bad habits. So, if you don't want to eat crisps or don't want to eat junk food or sugar, you have to eliminate it from your environment. So that's why, because every time we see food, our brain needs to make this decision whether am I going to eat it or not. So when you have to make those decisions 200 times per day because you are surrounded by all those foods, in your environment, at some point it's going to be harder not to give into whatever your craving is. So design your environment so it's kind of unfriendly for your bad habits. And the same applies to good habits. If you decide that you want to do yoga every day or move more, and you don't even know where your exercising clothes are, you have to start there. You have to practically prepare your clothes. Or if you want to read a book, make sure that it is in your environment. So you're getting yourself a chance to have those cues. So you will naturally be one step ahead, and that's going to be easier for you to implement.
I really like that, setting up the environment in the right way. And it is often, we talk about kind of spring cleaning out our kitchen cupboards and things as well, because if those, if the things are in there that you don't want to eat, but they're there, like you say, you're having to consciously make that or subconsciously make that choice every time you go into the cupboard. But Jo, this is a podcast about longevity and health span. So we are wanting to talk about the habits that we develop, perhaps in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, and how that translates into health later on in life. I think ultimately the habits that we develop now can make or set us on a completely different trajectory later on in life. You're talking about, making kind of small changes. So, for instance, the reason I've started this podcast is because I ran my true biological aging results, and they were a little disappointing, I'll be very, very honest. I was just 3 years younger than my actual age, and I expected it to be better, given that I know everything, not know everything, but I know a lot about health and longevity. And so I know what I need to do. I do know I need to move more. I need to eat better. I need to focus on sleep. So I've got a very long list, right? So how do you make those big jumps? How do you make,
That's a great question. I'll probably start by saying that complexity is the enemy of execution. So we have to simplify it, right? And I would probably recommend starting by evaluating all the pillars of health. So obviously you, with your knowledge, you know what you should be doing, right? And you know that certain areas, you're performing very well. So spending some time and do like a little inventory where you can look into your, your nutrition, your diet, your exercise, your movement, your emotional health, stress management, your circadian rhythm, and maybe some other areas that are important for you, like creativity. How do you, your relationship with other people? So you can create like a little, let's call it a wellness wheel, and you can have a different, pieces that are important for you that create health, and evaluate how well am I doing with those specific areas. And then you will break down, for instance, you never introduce too many changes at the same time for the reasons that I mentioned at the very beginning about you don't want to trigger the survival instinct, and then your brain will take you back to your old habits. So one step at a time. I do like using the tool called setting SMART goals. So SMART meaning, your goals are specific. So you want definitely them to be well defined. You want to exactly know what you're doing. Then M stands for measurable. So you want to be able to track your progress, right? And then A stands for achievable. So you want them to be, you want them to be achievable for what is available for you at this very moment. And then you want them to be relevant to what your goals are. So obviously your goal is to be 30 again. Not that you're far away from it. Yes. So your goals will be relevant to, your little goals will be relevant to your big goal. And then the last part, T, stands for time frame or time-based. So you definitely want your goals to also be specific and in terms of time. So you want to have deadlines, you want to have some sort of time frame, and you can work with one thing at a time. So where do you think you would start if you're going to evaluate each of those areas of health? Which one is going really well and which one do you believe you would like to optimize?
Is that a question that you want me to really answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I think I'm doing very well. Diet and nutrition, I think I'm doing very, very well. I'm doing well. Sleep. I'm not doing so well on stress. And I definitely can be doing more around movement. My job is quite sedentary. I'm sitting for long periods in the day. I do exercise, but bringing a little bit more movement and things in would be good as well. So in terms of your SMART goals, I have got specific goals in mind. So I am planning to retest my biological age in 1 year from now. So I've got a deadline, and I have a very specific goal in that I want to shave another 3 years off my biological age. So I've got those little bits, and then I know which areas I need to be focusing on a little more as well.
And do you know specifically what goals you would like to implement in terms of stress management, for instance?
That's where I'm a little bit more stuck. So I know that stress can be harmful for health. I know it isn't always harmful for health, that a lot of it is how we perceive stress as well. But I am aware that my stress levels are higher than they should be. I know what tools to use because also I have been working with Joe for a long time. So I know what tools I need to implement, but I'm not really doing them. And I think my excuse a lot of the time is time, I'm up just after 5 in the morning. I go to the gym. I do my, I'm doing all the other things really well, but I'm not making time to really deal with stress. And I don't know why. Maybe it's like a mental block or something along those lines, but I kind of know what things I need to do. I'm not doing them.
And sometimes, when I listen to people talking about what they believe the obstacles are, the kind of common one is time, right? And the wrong perception that in order to achieve, relaxation, we have to sit on the cushion and meditate for hours, which is not true. You know more about the nervous system than most of us. And it's about those tiny little things that we do regularly. So I'm talking about 1 minute every hour to, taking some time for some conscious breathing. As you know, I'm fascinated about breathing because there's a direct link between the way how we breathe and how our nervous system responds to it. Breathing is my favorite because you don't need to necessarily go into meditative states. You can just change the way how you breathe physically, and that will communicate with your nervous system. Even if you mentally are still maybe overwhelmed, on the physical level, you're already giving your body a chance to relax. So it's just about finding something that works for you. So can you think of any specific ways or specific solution for now?
Yeah, it might even be that between patients, like, just taking a minute and focusing on breathing. So instead of checking my emails or checking my phone, which probably just adds a little bit more stress when you see your email count piling up, just saying, I'm just going to do 1 minute of breathing. That's definitely achievable. It's easy. It doesn't add a lot more to my day.
And what is also very kind of beneficial about this approach is that you will get a reward. The reward will be pretty much immediate because you're going to feel better after doing this exercise for 1 minute. So you're already creating the positive reinforcement in your brain. So it's not that every time you do a 1 minute breathing, you need to give yourself, you can give yourself a square of dark chocolate or something like that. But, it will ultimately create positive reinforcement, because we're just going to have this good feeling about being present and relaxing a little bit.
So a few years ago, I decided to incorporate health coaching into my practice. And it has been the best thing that I have done in my practice. It's been such a transformation in kind of just helping people to move from taking what they need to do and actually being able to do it. And for me, there was this great story I want to tell. Now, I have this lovely patient struggling with a lot of chronic things, rheumatoid arthritis. And we'd been working together for quite a number of years, 6 or 7 years, I think. And I had been talking to her about, things that she needs to do. But we were really struggling to get her to do it. And she'd come in and she'd go like, I know you told me what to do, but I haven't done it and I don't know why. And I'm like, I don't know why you're not doing it, either. So we're primarily struggling with making changes in a diet. And so I said, well, look, I have this new health coach. Why don't you go off and see Joanna? Which she did. And a couple of months later, I talked to her and she's made massive changes. She's implemented so much, going through that health coaching journey. And Joe, I contacted you and I said, like, how did you do it? How did you do it? Because 6 or 7 years we've been working together, couldn't get her to make any change. And then she went through this coaching process. So that's a long story. But my question to you is, what is health coaching and how does it work and help people to make some of these kind of difficult changes?
That's another great question. So I was trained with Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, and the approach that they are kind of based on is very much client-centered. It's also rooted in positive psychology, functional medicine, and we use all sort of different tools to help to create a very tailored and structured and specific plan for each person individually. So the plan that is accessible, sustainable, but in order to do so, you really need to understand that person that you're working with, because there's so much, so much advice and information out there, but there isn't such a thing as one size fits all. So you really need to understand their lifestyle, how much time do they have, what challenges they're likely to face or they have faced in the past. So you're spending a big, at the beginning, the initial consultation, you're really learning a lot about your client, and you're not designing something that you believe will be good for them. You're actually actively listening and designing something that they're able and capable of implementing. And for some people like yourself, you've been on this journey for a long time. So for you, it wouldn't be a problem to have a list of 10 different tasks and habits to implement. But for someone who, like that specific person you're talking about, she may just need to start with 1 or 2 small steps, before making a bigger jump. So yes, it's a very interesting approach. And I think that's why it also works as well, because, we all need very different protocols, very different advice. Having someone who holds you accountable. So that's, health coaches. That's what we do. We also work with trans theoretical model of behavior change. So we're helping people to understand at what stages they are, and we help people to navigate the way back when they are relapses, for instance, because change is very dynamic. Change is dynamic, so it's not linear. So there are different stages, and we all start in somewhere in kind of pre-contemplation, contemplation, when we start thinking about maybe making some changes. And then usually they go to see you when they are already in pre-contemplation stage or preparation stage. They come to see you to gather information, to gather resources, and health coaching really helps to move from preparation to action stage. So action stage is when you already start implementing, when you already know what you're doing, and then you help them to kind of navigate the way to maintenance when something becomes, automatic and habitual. And then also educate people that you may always go back to, your contemplation, preparation, because life happens. But when you have someone who helps you and guides you to this process, I personally believe it's so much it's much easier for us to implement those changes successfully.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've definitely seen it in my practice. All my new patients that come in now get to spend some time with yourself, Joe. And I have seen that it has made a very big difference in just overall how people are able to implement, some of the things that we would, I want them to do. But like you say, it has to be centered on that person, on what they really want to do as well, and what their own health goals and their own health journey is, and kind of listening and honoring that part of it. I think that's been a very useful conversation. And I suspect that over the next few months, I may be coming back to you for some repeat podcasts, because I do think it's such a big topic. Over the year to come, I'm going to be tackling a lot of things that, can be very helpful in, just in the way that we're aging. So, we all know exercise and eating well, all these things will keep you healthier longer. And it's a journey in how you begin to make sustainable change that's going to last. So I suspect this will not be a single conversation, but probably something we'll, dip in and out of and keep coming back to again, talking about this massive topic of how do we actually begin to change.
And I'll probably add to it that when we talk about longevity, if you want to predict your future, start creating it. So that's very important. And you can start with those tiny little small steps today. Remember that, how do they say that? Small hinges swing big doors. Is that how you say it?
Say that one more time.
Small hinges swing big doors.
That is really, I think, quite a powerful image, isn't it? I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. Is there anything else right now that you think could be helpful for people who are contemplating making change? Is there anything you think?
So there's one full hour or 90 minutes workshop coming on the 28th of March for anyone who wants to join. And it's specifically on health coaching and psychology of change. So we will use lots of coaching tools and introduce people to stages of change, and also the SMART goals and positive, negative motivators. So we'll talk about all of that. So yes, you can sign up via your website, Charmaine. Under events, there's a link. And I'm also I'm also thinking about live coaching sessions, maybe once a month, to allow people to join a live coaching session and see how it works when what questions are asked and how we work hands-on, so to say, with clients. So there'll be option for that as well. So yeah,
that's quite nice to do it in a group setting as well. I think people learn very much from each other and each other's experiences. Well, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I'll be having you back on the podcast very soon if you're happy to be my guest again.
Thank you so much, Charmaine, and good luck with everything that you're doing.